recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Virtualization Security Podcast, episode number 69. Our panelists today are Eben Rodriguez, who consults with enterprises to system and secure and operate their virtual environments. Actually, Eben just got a new job. Congratulations to him. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say to where yet.
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead. My LinkedIn's updated.
Excuse me?
My LinkedIn is up to date, so you can say it. It's public.
Okay, so Eben got a job at eBay. Congratulations, Eben, where he's been consulting for a while. So, congratulations. Michael Berman is the CTO of Catbird and the pioneer and industry leader in security and compliance for virtual environments. And Michael, do you have anything new to say?
Not this week.
Not this week, okay. And joining us from HITRUST is Boris. And Boris, unfortunately, I do not know your title, but you were sent to us from Hemaprabhu Chandra, who is the CTO and Senior VP of, what's her new role? What is it?
Well, she is, this is Boris. Hema is now in charge of product development, meaning engineering and product management. So that's the function she oversees. And my new title is VP of Advanced Products at HITRUST.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And my name is Edward Haletke, a.k.a. texiwill in the VMware Communities forums and just about everywhere else, and author of the book VMware vSphere and Virtual Infrastructure Security, Securing the Virtual Environment, as well as VMware ESX and ESXi in the Enterprise Second Edition. If you would like those, they're both available on Amazon. Our podcast is equalized by Tim Pearson, a contributing author to my VMware vSphere and Virtual Infrastructure Security book and owner of Data Century, Inc. Our special guest panelist today just joined us, so I get to announce him now. It's Anil Karmel, who's a solutions architect at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Thank you for joining us, Anil.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Ed.
We decided to start a little earlier. So, Anil, one of the things we wanted to talk about, Anil and I met when we were at VMworld at one of those mixer things that they had that VMware offered. It was an interesting set of conversations. And last year they started talking about this, but this year they really talked about it, and that is that Los Alamos has what they consider to be a secure multi-tenant cloud infrastructure environment for use by Los Alamos people on both sides of the fence. So, why don't you tell us just a little bit? Take about 5 minutes to tell us what you have there.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. And thank you for the opportunity to share our story here, Ed. So in terms of what we've built here at Los Alamos, let's start at the very beginning as to who we are and what we do. So Los Alamos National Laboratory is a Department of Energy national laboratory based in Los Alamos, New Mexico. We run under the auspices of the National Nuclear Security Administration. So our primary mission is to ensure the safety and reliability of the U.S. nuclear weapons stockpile. But by the same token, we are a DOE broad research institution, so we do broad general research as well. So with that said, security is something that is very important to us, and we do due diligence. We have a variety of different solutions in place to secure our data to ensure it doesn't leave our borders, if you will. So with that said, one of the things that we did in terms of virtualizing our environment and really achieving agility is we made an investment about 6 years ago in virtualization, and we did what most other companies have done in the sense that we virtualized our existing infrastructure. We achieved great ROI, we achieved great energy savings and whatnot, but that really wasn't enough. We really needed a way to have a multi-tenant, secure environment where we could agilely deploy applications based on the security profile that was appropriate for that particular type of application. So what we did is we partnered with VMware, and we developed some technology. They developed some technology to create Los Alamos' first private cloud, which actually in all reality is DOE's first private cloud, something that we call infrastructure on demand. And what it's comprised of is a self-service portal that allows users to automatically request and provision virtual servers on demand. It does all of the automation. We have users that log into a Los Alamos written portal They request a server. It goes through a governance process to automatically request that and approve it. And then from that point forward, all the orchestration is automated from the standpoint of creating those machines, instantiating those machines in the appropriate security enclaves, and applying rules to those to ensure that there is appropriate security based on the type of application or workload that's being hosted on that VM. So let's delve into that a little further as to what our security model is. We are leveraging VMware's technology stack. We were the launch customer for VMware's vCloud Director and for vShield. And some of the new features that you see in vShield actually came from our deployment, which I'll speak to shortly. So in terms of the vCloud Director implementation, we have separate provider VDCs and organizational VDCs based on the type of workloads that are hosted within the environment. And we've created this concept called enclaves. In a traditional physical security model, most government networks and most likely corporate networks are segregated or set up using hardware appliances and VLANs, in the sense that different enclaves are created based on the type of data that's being processed. So what we've done is we've taken that physical security model and translated it to a virtual security model leveraging vShield. So we create the same enclaves virtually using vShield, and we've gone a step further and created this concept called sub-enclaves for our virtual desktops. So virtual desktops reside in sub-enclaves within the primary enclave, and we've created vShield rules to eliminate lateral communication. That way, if an attacker were to take over one virtual desktop, they couldn't go sideways and take over all the virtual desktops. And we've created intra-enclave rules to determine what those virtual desktops can talk to, and intra-enclave rules as to what virtual desktops can talk to from one enclave to the other. So from a security standpoint, the way our portal works is you are allowed to pick from a specific security profile, and then an IP address and all the VLANs. All of those things are completely dynamically assigned to you based on the security profile that's selected at time of provision. We automatically instantiate workloads in the appropriate vCloud Director cell or vCloud Director PDC, and put it in the appropriate vShield security enclave, apply the appropriate controls and permissions, and ensure that there is full segregation through the stack. And that segregation goes all the way up and down the stack, both at the network layer, at the virtualization layer, and at the storage layer. We have separate storage enclaves for each one of these environments, leveraging the NetApp infrastructure that we have in place. So we use separate NetApp vFilers for each individual security enclave to do segregation at the storage layer.
So it begs the question when you start talking about this, and one of the things I always talk about, but before we get there, is there a white paper or anything on this that people can look at?
Well, I haven't written anything yet. So that's on my list of things to do, but I've talked about it, but I actually haven't had the time, to be honest, to actually write something yet. But we do definitely want to document our reference architecture, because it is something that I think other people could learn from and possibly leverage in their environments.
So vFilers allow you to use separate enclaves, basically to divide up your storage into secure buckets of disk.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to interrupt. I may have misheard. I just want to make clear. You're using separate filers per enclave or separate vFilers per enclave?
Separate vFilers per enclave.
Exactly how CVN works. The Cisco VMware NetApp. They use separate vFilers at the storage.
Yep.
And separate vFilers at the storage also tend to require you to use separate control ports. You can't necessarily use the same network to present those LUNs to the storage, to the hypervisor. But are you doing that? Are you using VLANs? How are you presenting the iSCSI and NFS storage up to the hypervisor?
So I can tell you all of these things. There are some things that are truly classified that I can't talk to specifically. So I will have to
tell us that's the case. That's the case. We understand.
That's it. So there is segregation and controls at the network layer and at the storage layer. I can speak to it at a 10,000-foot overview. When we start talking to the actual details of our implementation, we start crossing that bridge into the classified space.
Are you talking about you're just using standard networking segregation, or are you using physical segregation?
No, we're using networking segregation.
Okay. So once you get up in there, now you're going from a from the virtual filer to the virtual control point to the hypervisor, from the hypervisor using its VM kernel interfaces to display the data, to give the data up to the VMs, which are on their own virtual networks. So from a storage perspective, the VM talks to the hypervisor talks over this virtual control point to the virtual filer. Mm-hmm. Who has access to your hypervisor?
Very good question. So we restrict access to the hypervisor to just the ESX admins. So our ESX admins are the sole people that have access to our hypervisor.
Now, have you changed vCenters so they can't do file views and things like that?
Yeah, we do full segregation up and down the stack and full separation of duties up and down the stack. So we have storage administrators that can see the storage. We have, unfortunately, storage can see everybody, right? So because they are the administrators of storage, but ESX administrators do have segregation, so they don't see everybody else's data. And we've got segregation that, of course, need to know based on the type of data that is hosted within each enclave, segregated within vCenter and VCD and vShield, all of these different layers. And of course at the vFiler layer as to who can see what within the vFiler. So
my biggest thing is if I'm an ESX admin and I can log into the ESX host, I can see everything.
True, and just like the storage admin. So
yeah, you can do everything, you can see everything, and that's why I call this trusted multi-tenancy, not secure multi-tenancy, because I still have to trust that admin to do everything right.
True. So there is trusted multi-tenancy. Now keep in mind the type of workloads that we're dealing with here in this particular context, because I can't speak to the classified context, are unclassified workloads in this unclassified environment. There's a classified version of this, which I definitely can't speak to in an open environment with classified protections and controls. With that said, all of us that have access to these types of resources have clearances and are authorized to see this type of data within these different enclaves. So on the classified side, there are far more protections and controls that I unfortunately can't speak to on an open call. But on the unclassified side, it's less of an issue and less of a concern. And the type of data that we're talking about hosting here in this particular context is indeed, Department of Energy data.
Which Michael, so if I can, I want to interject one question, though. I know you can't speak to the specific classified controls, but are you running, and this would be of interest to some people in the classified community that I work with, I think I can frame this question. Are you operating any cross-domain with virtualization?
Can you elaborate on cross-domain?
So a multi-compartment or multiple classification level enclave or enclaves on a shared, say, VMware cluster or VMware, vCenter instance, so to speak.
Using our classification levels, yes, that is the model that we're using. Now, there's different classifications for different people. They mean different things to different people. But using ours, that's the model that we're employing. Okay.
If you don't mind, let's follow up after the call. I may want some people in the federal community to follow up with you, who have proper clearances, and, you might want to discuss more detail with them.
Sure, happy to do that.
And Neil, I can put you in touch with Michael.
Okay.
If you don't already have access to it.
Happy to do that. That'd be great.
Okay. So, hopefully Michael would start that question. So, at the moment, say I have one level of and let's talk the unclassified side.
You could do multiple sensitivities there, just saying health information versus credit card information as an example or something.
Well, yeah, it's different sensitivities of data. Do you cross the domains and the sensitivities? Are there users that can do that? Are there VMs that can do that?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of data and the security profile of that information and who can access it. So there are multiple levels of sensitivity on our unclassified environment, and there are some people that can bridge the domain based on the type of information that they have and that they're leveraging. And that's part of those inter-enclave rule sets that I spoke to.
So if I'm doing it on a virtual desktop, am I presented multiple virtual desktops, one for each sensitivity layer, or am I presented just one and I can do whatever I want?
So it depends on the type of user that you are. Today, it is you're provided with a menu. So from your virtual desktop, you have a menu of different virtual desktops that you can select from that are based on the type of enclave that you request. So you can select a virtual desktop from a particular enclave and access data within that enclave. If there are virtual desktops that have access to multiple enclaves, that's another item on that list based on what you do.
So you provide to the user this menu. So are you using dumb terminals like a panel logic or something like that, or a zero client that basically that's where the menu lives, or is this something you share up as another piece of technology?
So today we're using ClearCube on 9422s on our unclassified domain using View.
Okay.
Using VMware View.
Yeah, using VMware View. So these are PCUIP0 clients.
That's pretty cool.
So I've got a question on the use of the vFiler for separation. Is that to separate the storage admins?
So the nice thing about the vFiler is it actually can leverage, separate out the storage admins and say, storage admins don't have access to these types of things. On the unclassified domain, we do, give the storage admins that access because they can see everything, and we do have to do some sort of trusted multi-tenancy in that environment. So they do see it, but really where the segregation comes into play is who else can see that data. And the vFiler allows you to segregate access based on rule ACLs on the vFiler as to who can access what on the vFiler. So that's a pretty elegant solution for us, allowing us to segregate out storage. So while the storage admins can see things, and we could segregate it out on the unclass, we've chosen not to.
Okay.
So the vFilers are basically just to segregate sensitivity levels or enclaves from each other.
That's correct.
At the storage layer.
Yes.
Which is pretty much the only. I'm not sure you can do it any other way.
I'm not aware of another approach at this juncture, which is why I just selected this approach.
I think the other way would be separate physical devices. Sorry.
Right. Separate physical storage devices would be the only other way.
To my knowledge, I think that's correct, but if anyone else has any other ideas to that end, I'd be happy to hear them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, and maybe Mr. Foley can chime in here, I'm not sure. I think there's virtual SANs out there that are very similar to the idea of the vFiler, but I could be wrong.
Name one.
I thought, I was going to name Cisco because I've sucked up some Cisco marketing lately. But I would be so shocked if EMC didn't have something like that, too.
I'm not a storage guy, so I couldn't tell you.
Any of the virtual SANs that I've seen so far do not have that segregation.
For the administrative layer.
At the administrative or the level of it. Because remember, a virtual SAN will share up anything presented to it. So if I present from, let's say I'm using a optimizing virtual SAN like a data core or a Falcon Store, or I'm using a raw storage virtual SAN like a Solera or a StarWinds or an OpenFiler, or I'm using something else that's a hybrid of the two to give me more functionality, it takes whatever you present to it and optimizes that or presents that out in another way. So one of the nice things about the raw storage ones is that if I have local disk, I can present a lot of local disk to those storage devices, the virtual ones, and those virtual devices then present iSCSI to the rest of the cluster.
Yeah, I think what I'd heard about the virtual SAN was that it did slice the data. So you had, LUNs in a virtual SAN, and the systems that had access to those LUNs only had access to those LUNs in that virtual SAN. And administratively, there was a separation so that, other administrators could not connect up, hosts to those LUNs unless they had the proper permission to that vSAN.
But that's the standard storage presentation and zoning. Those are the real protections in storage these days.
So I have a question. Now that we have version 5 and the virtual storage appliance from VMware, has there been any thought of leveraging that for isolation?
So that's an interesting model and a concept, and I did take a look at that. It does allow you to take these amorphous DAS solutions and virtualize it using this vSAN, but it's really designed for the SMB market as opposed to the large enterprise, right? So
I wasn't saying necessarily the version that's available today, but if you look at the concept around virtualizing my storage, so that I could run, say, 2 VSAs, one, we'll say, internal and external, so we don't start mixing terminologies here. And, certain people can run workloads on one, but not on the other.
Right. So I think the concept, in my opinion, actually is a very good concept and could certainly be used in this particular construct and model. I don't see massive downsides. Definitely for the SMB, it's a great model.
Mm-hmm.
For the large enterprise, depending on what you're doing and depending on the size of your enterprise and the type of enclaves that you have, it could be a cost-effective solution. For us, one of the reasons why, again, I chose the NetApp is, we chose the V-Series. That's the solution that we selected. The V-Series allows me to virtualize my existing storage arrays and present them all back up via NFS. So I can take fiber channel storage instead of having fiber channel storage coming in through fiber channel and iSCSI storage coming in through an iSCSI port and everything. I can take all of that, virtualize it behind the V-Series, and present it all back up via NFS and carve it up via vFilers. So there was an attractive value prop for me there to leverage that as an enterprise-grade solution. Will NetApp storage appliance or VMware storage appliance certainly fit that bill long term, depending on the types of models, on the size of the enclaves and the environments. As the solution matures, I can see that being a potential viable alternative.
But here's the other question that comes into mind with us is that when you have a vFiler or the V-Series and you just present to it a bunch of, as you said, amorphous storage, doesn't make a difference what it is. The vFiler is not necessarily separating that everywhere. So, it could be writing like blocks of sensitivity on each one of those devices because it could be striping across them. It could be doing anything. How are you guaranteeing that the blocks of data, when they get written, are not crossing sensitivity boundaries on the same disk? Because what happens in your environment when you have to get rid of a disk? You literally have to destroy it if something leaks. So in an environment like this, you can't cross disk boundaries.
Correct, and we do destroy disk. With that said, it all comes down to the LUN and aggregate design, which I can't speak to on an open call. But you can do segregation at the LUN and aggregate design and still leverage vFilers. So based on the way that you set those up, you can do segregation there so that you're not mixing data based on the way you lay out your LUNs and aggregates. And
so, Mike, that begs the question: is how many people are good enough to do that with the VMware VSA or any VSAs that are out there today that they just aggregate a bunch of storage, and if they don't do it right, you will have an issue.
How many people are using role-based access control in vCenter?
This is
call.
Well, yeah. This is the question, right? So the number of people who said, what we really need is sell Linux for storage, right, or sell Linux for this or sell Linux for that. They're absolutely right, but you still have to do the administrative work to delegate those access and roles. And we really need to make this as a community, as a vendor, right? Make this easier for people, because only by making it less expensive and easier to configure, ideally transparent, will people adopt it. I think that's the issue. What LANL is doing here is phenomenal, but it's obvious they've got a group of really smart people to make this work.
Yes, but it also took a lot of people sitting down and saying, okay, this is how we have to design it, this is how we have to architect it in such a way so that when they go off and data does leak across, they can destroy the appropriate disk, because that's the current model in the government. If we're talking about any type of government, they're going to know about this already. If we're talking enterprises, they may or may not.
And so to add to that, the enterprise, really comes down to what the risk is for the enterprise for these different types of enclaves and these types of environments, and whether or not those protections and controls are necessary based on the type of data that they process. So In the government, we certainly have those needs and protections and controls that are required. In the private sector, there most likely, can be the same type of thing depending on the industry, depending on the vertical. So, it really comes back to, doing a thorough risk analysis of the environment, what makes sense, defining, sitting down and architecting it so that the solution that you come up with meets the criterion and the needs of that particular organization. And you can't just go to a vendor and say, I want this. It really does take, a team to sit down and focus on what are the challenges and what are the right solutions to truly deliver a transformative user experience at the end of the day. Because that's really what we're all trying to do, is develop something that's cost-effective, that's scalable, and delivers a good user experience to our constituents without sacrificing scalability, performance, or security.
Okay. So from the industry, what are you lacking right now? So let's just start with, say, from VMware and then from the security industry in general. What are the one or two top things that you'd really want today and you could put into good use?
So because I have them covered under multiple NDAs with lots of different vendors, there are solutions and problem sets that we have posed to our trusted vendor community that they are actively working on as we speak.
No, I don't care about what they're actively working on. I'm saying what you would like to see from... As a user, can you say... As a user.
Yeah, see, then I'd be violating my NDA with them because I told them, go work on this problem, and they're working on it with us. Okay. So that's my challenge. There are problems in this space. There are active problems, and maybe I can just speak to it generically without breaking my NDA. So let me think on that for a moment and pose another question, and I'll come back to it, see if I can come up with a generic answer without violating my NDA.
Well, the one thing I'll speak, how about this, Mike? I can speak as a vendor, right? So I'm a vendor. I've done automation work for zoning at the network layers and to some degree zoning within the administrative tool space for, say, VMware, right? And I try to make that as simple and easy as possible. What I don't have is a way to do that for storage. And in part, that's because, I'm not a storage vendor. But the other part of it is I don't have do I have a single API? Do I have any API, right? And this is where, I don't want to overplug, EMC on this talk, but I'll give them some due. There are some APIs there that I'm seeing with, UIM and storage management for EMC solutions, where if I can get really smart, I can start to think about how when a security administrator sets up a zone for VMs, I could set up the zoning rules for the network traffic and the storage segmentation or compartmentalization too. What I didn't see, and maybe it's there and I'm just ignorant of it, is how to then also do that segmentation at the administrative layer. So what we're talking about that he did at LANL that's fascinating is they've used vFiler to also segment administrators. And that's a piece that I didn't find elsewhere. I haven't found elsewhere until I saw that. And that's why I posted this vSAN link. I read this on Cisco. I don't know that it works or does what it says it does.
I can't tell you either.
So I'm just saying, I think as an operator, I want a transparent way to set a zone or set a compartment, and that should apply to the storage and the hypervisor and the VMs and the networking, because it's really hard to get all this stuff right. And if I have to go to 4 different places, then it's really hard.
Well,
it's fraught with error.
It's fraught with error.
Well, the other thing is, Mike, once you get into the hypervisor, there is no way to do this. I mean, if I'm looking at I'm literally in the hypervisor at the ESXi management console or the ESX service console. There is no way to segregate who can see what, even as an admin. You have to run as an admin. Now, I can do it using possibly sudo and a few other things, but they can always see. So
but if I'm in the enterprise, I'm not worrying about that, because even if they're deploying ESXi, they're deploying it with vSphere management.
No, actually, I am concerned about that, because the weakest link in any network right now, or any environment right now, is the management constructs inside of virtualization. That is the biggest, weakest link. That is the one that is being attacked the most. It is by far the easiest to attack. I would really, ideally, for what I would like to see, I would like to see 2 things. encrypted memory and MLS-style support inside of the management consoles of these hypervisors. I mean, like, put SE Linux in it or whatever you want, but allow me to say the users can't see this. This application can, but can't transmit the data to the user. You give me that capability, I'd be happier. Far happier.
So I'm going to take that a step further. You need to, and this is something that GD has done a great job with on the VMware side. You guys are familiar with the GD solution for MLS using VMware Workstation on a Dell, right? Yes. Right, so that solution, leveraging Intel TXT, trusted execution, that model, scaling that model to a vSphere environment, leveraging TXT is something that would be intriguing. So there's some things there that might be of interest. And you're right. The user construct is something that is a problem set in the sense that if a user gets compromised, what does that user have access to? So if there was an easy way to really determine this user has access to all of these different things at all of these different layers, then you know what your levels of compromise are. And you know what the attacker is looking for. Because the attackers, what is the attacker looking for? They're looking for the guy that has the highest privilege, right? And then how they can go laterally. So having a construct wherein you know what the user has access to, and being able to limit that access, based on an attack vector, number one. Number two, from the standpoint of if a compromise is detected, rapidly shutting it down. Having that transparency and visibility is important.
Okay, I would agree with that.
Do you
have it today?
We have it. Do we have it today in industry tools? No.
But what you're talking about also is before you go to the cloud or touch a cloud or even create a cloud or do anything like that, you need to look at your data, you need to look at your users, and you need to look at your administrators and basically do a risk analysis.
You're exactly right.
And if your risk analysis says that this data is too risky to put in any cloud, then you just can't do it.
You hear no argument from me. That's correct.
But how do you do that risk analysis? I mean, what do we tell people? I mean, we tell people, do your risk analysis. And, I was reading Chuck Hollis's blog. It says, security people need to be the leaders. Or we take our information, we say we're doing our risk analysis, we take it up to the C-level, and the C-level say it's too expensive to implement.
So I have a great answer for you, but you're not going to like it.
Go on.
Stay tuned.
Does that mean all of us who are in security get to be leaders next week?
Let's just say that is a very active problem, and my answer to that is stay tuned.
And what it boils down to is, I think, the security professionals, Michael, you go through this all the time when you're talking to your customers. They need to be, the higher levels need to be made aware that there is a risk, and this is the value of that risk.
This is what I'm trying to communicate. Is forgive me if I fall into a little bit of a marketing spiel for a second, but the tone I'm trying to take is if you're virtualizing your data center, virtualize your security, and that this gives the security group the opportunity to be heroes, just like the infrastructure and VMware people are heroes, because you can get better security, better consistency at a lower cost. And it's a miss. I have to tell you though that 99 out of 100 people are missing this opportunity.
Oh yeah.
And that effectively what's happening is it's the VMware folks, the virtualization folks, that are by default having to take the lead on security. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on philosophically or emotionally to cause this, but it is what I'm seeing. And it's the more often than not, it's the VMware administrator who's the first person to call, a catbird and say, "Hey, I'm a little concerned. What should I do?"
Totally agree.
Absolutely agree.
Totally agree. I was in a session at VMworld, and we were talking just about this chasm between IT and security, and the IT guy said, "Oh, I don't want to involve security because they'll say I can't do this and I can't do that." And a security guy stood up and he said, "Well, I'm the security guy. We put the no in innovation." And it's true. It's true. I mean, like an example I talk to people about when I talk to customers is, we need to involve security up front, because the last thing you want to do is have them say, "Well, that's not the way we've always done it."
I know.
Right?
That's always what they say.
Right. So, for example, you roll in a new array, and I want to move all the VMs from array A to array E, and I want to use storage vMotion to do that. And the security guy comes in, gets a whiff of it, and says, "No, the way we've always done it is we backed it up to encrypted tape and then restored it to the new array." And great, you've just ruined my life for the next 6 months of weekends.
Well, not only that, you've allowed me never to do anything while the VM. I'm now having
and I can't do it while in production.
Well, but think about the fact that you're not actually doing true. Yeah. Your disaster recovery is like.
No, it's
zilch in that scenario. Yeah.
But that's the whole.
This is a business continuity issue as well. Is that the security people have just impacted business continuity. I cannot grow my business unless I can move that data to this new array while the business is still running.
Well, this is the point, right? It's a much better BCP solution, and if you look at risk, this is where we're really screwing up. We're not understanding that the risk from fire, flood, what have you, tends to be pretty high, and we're worried about what risk in doing the storage vMotion. What's the probabilities here? Are we really doing a rational measurement?
Well, it all comes down to education, and Edward and I have talked about this ad nauseum, as we talk about a number of things ad nauseum. And it's all about education. If the security guy doesn't understand it, and the security guy is only brought in at the end and told, "Go secure it," then he's going to, by default, stick with the way he's always done it.
Absolutely.
Because he's the guy assuming the risk, and he doesn't like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to involve. So I agree the two. So number one, you have to get the security people involved early, but I think we're failing to communicate. Maybe we're I'll exclude myself from that because we're trying to do better here at Capper. But we're failing to communicate that this is an enormous opportunity for the security people to really be a leader in innovation.
Yes. So to wrap it all up,
I got one more comment before you do that. And let's reverse this. We're saying security needs to be brought into the beginning. I have a different way of looking at this. I'm assuming security wasn't brought in at all. Okay, and that's probably the traditional, what we see probably 90% of the time.
I can testify to that.
Okay, security, instead of saying no, we can't do that, and basically getting run over by the train that's coming, should basically say, okay, let me do my risk analysis, which I was talking, when we originally started with this conversation. Let me do my risk analysis and say, okay, what is the most risk to the business from a business perspective? When they do that risk analysis, they may say, these parts of my environment are risky. Then they need to sit down and say, okay, let me talk to the virtualization folks and say, okay, how can I get better security? Do the education themselves. Then go up and with a plan that will work, come in and say, we need to implement this, this, and this, and it will improve security for the business. Because it's all business-driven.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't do that action, they don't take that action, they will not be the leaders, and the steamroller will just roll right over them. And there's a correlator to this. IT looks at security as the enemy.
They put the no in innovation.
Well, security looks at auditing as the enemy. And
so,
that means, and auditing looks at legal as the enemy. So the problem is now we got a really interesting problem.
Finally, there's one thing we can all agree with. Legal is the enemy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Lawyers are at the bottom of the ocean.
So, but when you look at this way, when you start talking about clouds, and Anil, I don't know how this fits into your environment, is that auditing has to be in lockstep with security to say, hey, we got compliance measurements to make. Let's make sure the security can give us those measurements. And before I put anything into the cloud, I almost have to contact legal to talk about jurisdiction.
So let me talk to you a little bit about our journey there, because security is something that, is paramount to our organization, and everything we do is architected with security in mind, with our security folks at the table, validating and vetting the solution, and ensuring that it does meet our technical and programmatic requirements. So auditing is key. We audit everything. That's important. Logging is key. And ensuring that our security folks have appropriate measures and controls and visibility into the appropriate compartments based on what they need to know is important. And being able to offline workloads when they're found to be non-compliant automatically, something that we worked very closely with our security folks, with VMware, and came up with a construct that is now part of vShield 5, wherein workloads are automatically put into a quarantine enclave if they're found to be non-compliant. Those are all things that were done because our security folks are at the table, and they were part of the equation from the beginning, and they got the warm fuzzy, if you will, so that we could, really take this journey forward as opposed to being held back.
And what about people trying to put workloads into your cloud? Does your cloud span multiple jurisdictional areas, or is it all one jurisdiction?
So, what we're talking about is unclassified workloads, right? So I'm going to have the unclassified conversation. So does the unclassified workload span multiple jurisdictions in terms of, our enclaves and the way that our enclaves are set up? Yes, on the unclassified side. So that definitely is the case. Are there commonalities? Of course. But with that said, there are definitely different silos that exist within the organization, and those silos are set up by those security profiles that I referenced. So we create those profiles, and we segregate based on those profiles, and or rather enclaves. That allows us to get the type of security we can with the, again, performance, flexibility that are important to our constituents.
Okay. So that's all good. So how can we do any last thoughts? I mean, we're stretching to the end of the hour here. Michael, do you have any last thoughts? Michael's on.
I'm very very interested in sort of hearing more about this solution. I would definitely, I think the community would appreciate it. I realize you have a job to do, but to the extent you can document this to any degree, certainly for the unclassified segment, this would be of value across all of federal, and might be a great best practice document for the commercial sector as well. And I'm actually going to, one of the people I'm going to introduce you with is my contact at the Department of Homeland Security, so that may be something that can be leveraged there as well.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah, happy to talk to our colleagues across the enterprise.
Mike Foley, you've been very vocal this time around. Of course, you don't represent anybody but yourself.
Even though I work at RSA, yeah. Anil, you and I met in Palo Alto during the beta.
Yeah, that's right. I remember now.
Yeah, I have your card right in front of me, so I'll send you email afterwards. But no, this was really interesting. I want to echo what Michael Berman said. Is I would love to read more and pick your brains on see if what I'm thinking and what you're implementing are lining up, and start thinking about how to take some of these thoughts and make them more consumable to the security professionals, and not only to the security professionals, but also to the IT people. I'm trying really, really hard to bridge that gap, and it's quite a challenge.
Absolutely, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we all face, and happy to share our thoughts there.
Okay.
So, Eben, are you still with us? Any last thoughts? You may still be on mute. So before we get to Anil, my real last thought is that I think from all this, if the security folks aren't involved from the very beginning, like they were with Los Alamos, they need to do the work themselves to get at the table. They need to either just come in and sit down one day and learn, or they need to do all the risk analysis and risk assessment that they can do and come up with a viable solution that's going to meet everybody's needs. And I actually would very much like to know more about how you're segregating everything, but that's a different story.
We all would.
Yeah.
Purely from a geek standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd love to share, but classified pieces that I can't. But there's a lot of cool geekdom. Let me tell you in there that is really cool stuff that we've written. So, yeah, happy to share as much as we can. And I think I've stayed out of the classified realm in this call. So.
Yep.
So Neil, what are your last thoughts?
So they actually echo all of your sentiments. I think all of your sentiments are absolutely accurate in the sense that security needs to be involved at the beginning, or you will fail. Because if security doesn't understand what it is that what problem you're trying to solve, and how you're trying to solve it, and have a voice as to how to solve it, you're not going to solve the problem at all. You're going to perpetuate the problem. So having security at the table is important, and that dovetails with another comment that was made, and that's the education comment. Ensuring that both security and all the stakeholders up and down the chain, from the end user to the CIO, director of the laboratory, fully understand, or whatever your constituents might be, fully understand what the solution is, what the space is, what the problem is, and how you're securely deploying this is something that is important. So having education and change agents within your organization to say, this is why we need to do this. Here's the business case, here's why, and here's how we're doing it securely and offering you flexibility and scalability at a lower cost than you could have done otherwise. So is it possible? I think we've proven that it is. Is it something that can be leveraged elsewhere? I think so as well. I think I've given you guys some things to think on in terms of ways to do true trusted multi-tenancy, and secure multi-tenancy is also doable. But of course that's a call for another day. In another venue. But in terms of is it possible? The answer I think at the end of the day is yes.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Sunil. It was very informative.
Thanks for having me.
And everybody else, Michael, Mike, Eben, thank you. And Boris, if you have any other questions, thank you for joining us as well. Boris is from High Trust, Sunil. He's just kind of listening in this time around.
I just want to mention that, Anil, I went to your talk at VMworld and I came away pretty impressed. It sounds like you've done a terrific job. Would love to find out more about it. Just one more comment, and I have to tread carefully because I don't want to, plug High Trust, but we do help with controlling access to the hypervisor. On that front, we do offer industry solution to help with that part of the problem, part of the puzzle, and we also help on the login side. So you might want to take a look at us and see maybe we can, we fit into what you're doing somehow. That's my only comment.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, maybe we'll have an offline conversation that end.
All right.
Absolutely. So other than that, and there's no more comments, I thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Virtualization Security Podcast. I hope to see you in 2 weeks. I believe in 2 weeks we'll actually have a QSA on, so we can have a QSA bake. So thank you, everybody.